Hello everyone, here is my guide on the Capsim Capstone 2017 stimulation. There are many guides online, however they are mainly all outdated. So I'll show you this guide with some of the new features in this stimulation. It is actually really enjoyable once you get to understand the whole thing. Firstly, I'll recommend you to read through the whole Capstone team member guide before actually looking at the game. And one of the first thing you have to look at in the game is the pro forma balance scorecard. This is really important because this is how you're marked upon. Everything is shown here. I wouldn't go too much into it. The main thing you have to take note is your initial score would always be low. However, if you don't, one general rule of thumb is if you don't reach a 120 score within the round 2, I would recommend you to revise a strategy or restart the game, because it's very difficult to grow in the following rounds. But that being said, you don't have to worry if your score is your score will always be low and progress throughout the rounds. So now I'm currently at round 4, and by the end of this round I expect to be at least a 180 to 190 as my operating profit increase. So the next thing you should take a look at is not the decision. You should take a look at what strategy you want. So most of us would like to jump right in and just go straight into the decision making. But what we need is a strategy. How are we going to win this game? Broad differentiator, it's one which most of the students tend to use without having a clear idea of the game. I would recommend a simple one would be a niche cost leader, which means you focus on the low tech. You gain a competitive advantage. You keep R&D, production and material costs to the minimum. I'm using this and I'll explain in the video some of the main factors you have to do this to be a niche cost leader. And also I'm slightly using a niche differentiator strategy, which means that you constantly provide R&D and concentrate efforts on promo and sales. So now I wouldn't elaborate on the explanation of the R&D, as there are many other tutorials above. Many other tutorials in YouTube. Just touch on how do you go about deciding on what to do. So for every product, the customer buy the product based on different factors. For instance, for traditional customer, they have the main criteria is the age to be about 2. So you don't want your age to be either too high or too low. Ideally, you reach it at 2, the age 2 at the end of the end of around December. And my main focus is on my main money making is on my low end. So what I do is I don't change it. It has been the 4th year so far, but I haven't did any changes, and I'm doing really well. I'll show you in a bit. And I just implemented a new product. So this is something you have to consider on your second and third round, especially if you're doing the high tech strategy, because the ideal age is 0. So you should create a totally new product to gain more market share. Okay, I wouldn't touch so much on R&D. There are other tutorials online. I'll move on to the pricing and forecast. So as you can see, Acro is providing me with a lot of margin. This is based on the forecast we should do. So once again, take a look at the front page report. For the I'll give you an example based on the low end segment. How do you calculate the forecast? So what you do is you take a look at the total industry unit demand and the next year segment's growth rate. So you just use this number and you multiply it by 100% plus the growth rate, and you determine what market share you have the next year. Because my price have always been consistently low and I've been gaining a bigger market share, and I've decreased my price again for this round. So I expect to get about 20% market share, and my sales forecast is 2008. So I wouldn't touch so much on this as there are other tutorials online. I'll touch on more on the promo and sales budget, which it's relatively new. I don't see any other tutorials online. So for the promo budget, the different media platforms actually have a different effect on each segment. For instance, for print media, it's really good for traditional and low end, but it's poor on high end and performance. So the key is to find out what's the best allocation of your resource into each segment for each target segment for each media, and to actually get the highest awareness forecast. So what you can do is you basically just do a trial and error. That's what I did, and these are the figures which I come out with, which based on the budget allocated for each, which I feel that is most effective. For instance, I can show you. Right now, my awareness forecast for traditional is 65%. If I'm actually increasing the trade show, which is trade show by 50, and decreasing the print media by 450, so now it's 65.39%. And you can see it actually decreased by 1%. So just concentrate your money on where it's performing good, and you don't even have to put into the poor performing, because it really improves the awareness by very little. The sales budget is slightly different. The ratio is slightly more equal for each factors. So for instance, for the outside distributor, it's high, so I actually put in, you got to take a look at the price also. For instance, each distributor costs 100,000, inside sales costs 50,000 per person, and outside sales costs 125,000. So these are the figures. I wouldn't go into much elaboration into it. It's really, once again, trial and error, but based on my figures, you can see the ratio roughly for each segment. You might want to take a screenshot to help you with the awareness and accessibility forecast. Okay, with that being said, I will move on to production. So for round one of the game, it is essential, no matter what your strategy is, I feel that it will be good if you increase your automation rating to 10 for Acro, because what the automation rating do is at a scale of 10, each the labor cost per unit is only 120, and considering that Acro it's a low-end product which you do not need to do modifications. It will serve as a in the long run, it will be really beneficial to your company if you actually automate it right from the start. However, for products like high-end products and performance and size, you wouldn't want to keep the automation too high because you have to constantly do R&D each year. So with a higher automation, under the Capstone guide, with a higher automation, you actually have a longer R&D time. So you try to avoid that. I just kept it at 3, didn't make any changes. And yeah, this is something which is also explained in the tutorial. So what do you do in other tutorials? What do you do? For instance, my AFT, what your production schedule is your unit sales forecast minus your inventory on hand. Following this, okay, some of my production here are different. That's because I decided to add in a few surplus to prevent stock out. So this is really all based on your own decisions. As for human resource, I feel that just putting in a moderate amount it'll be helpful in your balance scorecard under the employee section. So I place this amount for the each round. As for the finance, what do you want to take a look in based on the balance scorecard? I'll review it again. You got to make sure that your days of working capital stays between 30 to 90. Your leverage is at 1.8 to 2.8. So right now I'm a bit lacking on that. You can take a look a bit at my ratios. I'm at 1.6 for my leverage. So the leverage is the assets divided by the equity. So I'll have to reduce my equity. There's two ways to reduce my equity. So I'm going to retire as much stocks as I can. And since I have so much surplus cash, I'm going to give it out as dividends to reduce my give out my excess cash to actually ensure that my working days of working capital is kept low. So one of the thing I think not many people talk about is the price per share. How do you keep it high? What do you have to ensure is it's not about giving out dividends. It's about having a good stable finance, having a well-rounded financial overall. Sorry, I lost my train of thoughts. And just ensure that your company is growing and the share price would grow naturally. As a investor, they will tend to look at your ROE, your return on equity. So let's take a look at the financial part, because this is part of a balanced scorecard. So I keep my ROE relatively high, and therefore these are the main things which real life investors will look at. And for the stimulation, I feel that it follows quite well. So having good margins, good ratios on all these financial status will play a part in having good share price. So my share price is the highest out of all the companies. Next, I'll move on to the TQM, which have not been touched in any of which is recently updated. I saw only one tutorial on YouTube. So for TQM, you would like to try and max it out as much as possible, because it really helps you improve your in terms of your efficiency, your cost, you reduce your expenditure. So by the main two things you have to look at is the labor cost reduction and the material cost reduction, considering you're actually producing millions of product each year. So like a 10% material cost reduction would save you millions. So these are the two main factors you're going to look at. You can take a look at which of these initiatives reduces what. So for those which, for me, what I do is for those which reduces the material cost and labor cost reduction, I put in a 1850, which isn't ideal. I would recommend people to put in 1.5 million max, because after that they'll be diminishing returns. So you have to put in 1.5, and in minimum, if let's say your cash balance for your current stimulation you're not having a good financial standing, you have to put in at least 500,000, or else the projected impact is really low. Generally speaking, it's okay to max out on all of this, like putting 1.5 million for all, because you probably save more on the expenditure. I mean, the amount which you actually save would offset the initiatives, and for every round for every round you place money on the initiatives, you actually improve your efficiency as the game progress. So this is a really brief explanation, and I hope that I'm able to help in a way. This is my first tutorial, so forgive me if everything is very like my thoughts are my thoughts are not aligned, and I might have missed out some key points. So if you need any help, just email me or leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy doing this stimulation. So just before closing, I'll show how is it like for the how my score likes based on my decisions. So previously my balance scorecard was about at 160, and right now it's at 183, which I think it'll grow by another 20 by the end of round 5. One of the thing, so for me, I have to take note of a leverage and the days of working capital, but this is mainly due to the fact that I had an influx of cash based on the over the year of operating. So yes, I hope that this is helpful, and thank you very much for watching.